Well, Canada's housing minister thinks 2027 could be the year to expand Canada's housing market. He cites success in Australia's housing model in attracting foreign buyers, but would it change real estate law for Canada? Here to talk about what that means for the market and changing real estate laws for home buyers or renewing mortgages. What are you looking at?
I mean, it really comes down to personal comfort and how comfortable you are with risk.
This isn't just a line on a graph. This is the digital scream of 50,000 families in British Columbia and Ontario who, in the last few hours, just realized they are insolvent. Google is recording the exact moment the Canadian middle class began to break. Right now, while the mainstream news anchors are reading scripts about seasonal adjustments, the raw data is telling a much darker story. For the first time in over a year, search interest for mortgage rates has hit a vertical wall. 100% saturation. Total, unmitigated panic. But the spike isn't the real story. The real story is the January mandate. Behind the glass towers of the Big Five banks, a policy shift has just been finalized that effectively turns your home equity into a liability. If you are one of the 300,000 Canadians renewing a mortgage this year, you aren't just walking into a higher rate. You are walking into a trap that was set back in 2021. In this report, I am going to expose the bond market ghost that triggered today's explosion. More importantly, I will reveal the 3 specific high-stakes zones in the GITA and the Lower Mainland where the banks are now quietly restricting all new lending. You have exactly 12 minutes to understand this math before the market window slams shut. Let's look at the numbers the brokers are too afraid to mention. To understand the magnitude of today's 100-point spike, we first have to look at the payroll, where records show something local real estate boards refuse to mention, and what our subscribers have already been tracking beneath the resilience language, because while glossy brochures sell stability, the internal bank ledgers are bleeding, revealing the cold mathematical reality of the January surge. So subscribe. The renewal wave, 325,000 mortgages in Canada are hitting their expiration date in this 90-day window. The BC epicenter, in the Lower Mainland, the average household debt-to-income ratio has officially surpassed 280%, the highest in the G7. The payment shock, for the family that signed a 5-year fixed rate in 2021 at 1.9%, the jump to 6.4% is not a challenge. It is a $5,000 a month death sentence. The GITA drain. In Brampton and Mississauga, monthly payments on average detached homes are rising by $2,800. That is $33,000 a year in post-tax income. Vanished. The stress test failure, over 65% of those renewing today cannot pass the current stress test at a different bank, effectively making them mortgage prisoners to their current lender. This isn't just a fluctuation. This is a dopamine hit of reality for a market that has been high on cheap debt for a decade. But as the numbers rise, the behavior of the elite is shifting. There is a growing folklore in the hallways of the Bay Street elite. They call it the phantom inventory. It's the unsettling theory that thousands of luxury properties are sitting empty, not because they are sold, but because the owners are too terrified to list them and too broke to carry them. The high-stakes dialogue behind closed doors sounds different than the everything is fine narrative on the evening news. One veteran institutional lender, speaking under the condition of anonymity, described the atmosphere this January as a controlled panic. He said, "We aren't looking for ways to save these borrowers anymore. We've moved past that. We are now looking for the fastest way to liquidate the collateral before the floor falls out and we're left holding the bag." Is this phantom inventory just a ghost story meant to scare the middle class into a fire sale? Or is there a horrifying truth coming in the second half of this month that will make the 2008 crash look like a minor correction? To understand the scream of the market, we first have to look at the history of the 2021 trap. To find the answer, we have to crack the surface. I have obtained a verifiable document from a secondary lender in Ontario that proves this story has massive weight. This internal memo outlines a new liquidation timeline. Traditionally, a bank would wait 6 months of missed payments before initiating a power of sale. But the records show something the locals refuse to mention. In this new January mandate, that timeline has been slashed to 60 days. The banks aren't waiting for you to recover. They are clearing the books at lightning speed. The cost of this shift? For every day a property sits on the market in Vancouver or Toronto right now, the owner is losing an average of $412 in carrying costs and equity erosion. The noose isn't just tightening, it's accelerating. But before we reveal the 3 specific postal codes that have been blacklisted by the Big Five, we must address the practical explanation. Now, a critic would say this is all alarmist. They would argue that the January spike on my graph is simply people doing their taxes or planning their year. They'll tell you that the Canadian housing market is backed by immigration and limited supply, that the ghost isn't real. And they might be right. Perhaps the 50,000 families searching for mortgage insolvency today are just being cautious. Perhaps the phantom inventory is just a statistical lag in the ML system. But then, you have to ask yourself, if everything is normal, why did the 5-year bond yield jump at 9 LOM this morning while the rest of the world was looking at gas prices? We aren't here to pick a side. We are here to look at the data. And the data suggests that for a certain class of homeowner, the rational exit is no longer an option. Up until this point, we've talked about the market as if it's a game of numbers. But we need to flip the narrative. For the last decade, the Canadian home was a golden goose, a machine that created wealth while you slept. But as of January 2026, the story has changed. The house is no longer protecting the man, the house is consuming him. Think about the psychological toll of the mortgage prisoner. You are living in a structure worth $1.2 million, yet you are functionally poor. Every hour you spend at work is no longer going toward your retirement or your children's education. It is being siphoned away by the interest on a debt that is growing faster than your wages. The walls you painted, the garden you planted, it's no longer your sanctuary. It's a liability that the bank is quietly monitoring for any sign of weakness. To understand the scream of the middle class, you have to realize they aren't afraid of losing their house. They are afraid of realizing they've been working for a ghost. Before we reach the climax, we must reestablish the scale of what is unfolding, because the records show something the locals refuse to mention in public, and something that only becomes visible if you stay subscribed, leading us directly into the second surge of concrete reality. The liquidity gap. Canadian banks have increased their loan loss provisions by $4 billion this quarter, a signal they expect a wave of defaults. The listing explosion. New listings in the GTAW have spiked by 42% compared to this time last year, yet sales volume has plummeted by 18%. The investor exodus. Over 60% of the phantom inventory in downtown Toronto is owned by small-scale investors who are now losing an average of $1,900 every month in negative cash flow. The forced exit. Power of sale filings in British Columbia have reached a 14-year high this January. The unseen debt, private lending, the shadow banking sector now holds over 15% of the residential debt in Ontario, often at interest rates exceeding 12%. The authority of these numbers is undeniable. The dotted line on our graph wasn't a mistake. It was a warning. Finally, we address the mystery from the start of this report. What is the January mandate, and where is the noose tightening? Through internal documents, we have identified 3 high-stakes zones where the Big Five banks have quietly shifted their lending risk profiles. If you are in Brampton's L6P, Surrey's V3W, or Richmond Hill's L4C, your renewal process has just become a battlefield. In these zones, the banks are no longer looking at your credit score alone. They are looking at the concentration risk of the entire neighborhood. But as we close this chapter, a new question emerges. If the banks are pulling back from these zones today, who will be left to buy when the phantom inventory finally hits the market in February? The verdict remains open. You might see this as a temporary dip, a chance for the market to breathe, Or you might see it for what the data suggests, and what only becomes clear if you stay subscribed, the moment the Canadian dream became a mathematical impossibility, where the choice to stay or sell is yours, but the clock on the 2021 trap doesn't stop for anyone. The graph keeps moving, and the next spike is already forming.